Ladies and gentlemen, this is Nate Crespo, your host for today and forever, and welcome back to another episode of the Lawyers in the Making podcast, where it is my job to focus on the unique journeys to the law and law school of professionals in the legal field and law students. Let's talk about what we're doing today, because today we have another spectacular guest. He's a South Texas College of Law Houston graduate and currently works as an attorney and founder of Doyle and Seelbach, PLLC, and as a founder of Skribe. He has held past positions as the founder of edepo.com and as an investor and advisor in Medicine Box. Excited to have him on the podcast today, Mr. Karl Seelbach. Welcome to the podcast. How are we doing today?
Before going any further, I'd like to say a quick word about the sponsor of this podcast, Rhetoric. Back in episode 25, I had the privilege of having the CEO, Luke Yingling, on the podcast, and ever since that episode, fell in love with the product. Rhetoric takes user briefs and motions and compares them against the text of opinions written by judges to identify ways to tailor their arguments to better persuade the judges handling their cases. Rhetoric's focus on persuasion and helps users find new ways to improve their odds of success through more persuasive arguments. Know more, win more. I was able to see a demo of the product, and its cutting-edge technology and fascinating features make for a product I am proud to sponsor, and further shows the new digital era the field of law has been entering thus far on my journey doing this podcast. If you decide to book a demo, let them know Nate sent you. Be sure to check them out in the show notes below or at userhetoric.com. One word, userhetoric.com. Now, back to the show.
Thanks, Nate. Doing good. Excited to be here.
I am just excited to have you here, Karl. We have a pioneer, an innovator in the legal tech industry here with Skribe. I'm excited to talk about that. But before we get started, Karl, can you introduce yourself to the audience?
Yeah, so I'm an attorney based just outside of Austin, Texas, and have a wife and two kiddos. In my spare time, I spend a lot of my time cheering on volleyball games or basketball games, and so my life is kind of split between my work, my passion, and then my family. And so I managed my law firm. I launched it back in 2015 with a really good friend of mine. Really enjoy that. We can talk about that later. My passion is legal tech and technology in general. And so I'm kind of exploring that through the legal tech startup Skribe. And then the rest of my time is spent with my wife and two kiddos. I have girls that are ages 12 and 8. And they're kind of, the light of my life along with my wife. And we're always busy with something. There's not many free weekends.
Well, first, I'm always late to congratulate people, but I'd just like to say congratulations on the wife and two kids. That's amazing. I hope to have a family one day myself, but let's dive right in. You were at Stephen F. Austin State University. You majored in business and political science. You graduated there in 2003. The year I was born, I was 0. And the following year, you had ended up at South Texas College of Law, Houston. Now, simply put, Karl, why'd you go to law school?
Okay, I feel old now, by the way, now that you said
I'm
that
so
was the year
sorry.
you were born. That's okay. That's okay. In my mind, like a lot of us, I still feel like I'm in my 20s. And so, I guess I am 42 now. But so why did I go to law school? It's a pretty, straightforward answer to that. I grew up in Henderson, Texas, Northeast Texas, in a small town. And my dad is a safety engineer. And one of the things, he's primarily worked in the oil and gas business for the last 40 to 50 years. But one of the things that he did growing up as a side gig, before side gigs were as popular as they are today, is he did expert witness work in personal injury cases. So he would be home in his home office when he wasn't working on offshore oil and gas projects. And I would go to my dad's office, 8, 9, 10-year-old boy, knock on the door, go into the office. Dad, what are you doing? Let's go throw the baseball. Let's go play basketball. And sometimes, not pretty frequently actually, he would have stacks of depositions on his desk, and he would be reading deposition testimony from a personal injury case, that he'd be preparing a report on, his assessment of what caused the accident, what could have prevented the accident. So, I would go into his office, and finally one day he said, "Look, why don't you read one of these?" And he handed me a deposition transcript, and he kind of flipped to the more interesting section of the deposition. And it was a catastrophic injury. It was kind of a gruesome injury. And I started reading the description of what had happened, and I thought, man, this is fascinating. Like, this is interesting. And that was what piqued my interest in the practice of law, was that exposure.
So let's go. So actually, this is interesting because rarely do I have people who are interns at a specific law practice or some sort of internship before they get to law school. You were a summer intern at Fairchild, Price, Haley, and Smith. And so I'm interested, before going to law school, did that prep you well, having that internship experience before entering law school?
Yeah, yes and no. And the reason I say both is I was kind of a jack of all trades when I worked there. And I really like and respect that firm and the attorneys who work there, Russell Smith and Clayton Haley and some of the others that work there. They're great, great guys, great lawyers. But I was an undergrad, so I didn't have any legal training yet. So my ability to do, really legal work was limited. Now, they did give me some exposure to, summarizing depositions or doing some light research, for them. But I also was kind of a gopher. Like, I would literally one day one of the partners said, "Hey, today I need you to drive to Tyler to pick up a golf cart that I had some new wheels put on. Here's the keys to my truck. Here's the address. That's what you're doing today." And, another day I helped them move furniture because they were kind of rearranging the office. So it was really everything from file clerk to a little bit of research, a little bit of exposure just to them telling me about the types of cases they were handling. I mean, they did go out of their way to provide some mentorship, some training. But, I was 19, 20 years old, and, there was only so much I could really do from a legal expertise standpoint, which I really didn't have any yet. So most of what I was doing was just whatever they needed done around the office. But I think internships can be extremely valuable, not only to give you some exposure to what it's like to work in that environment with those people, but also just for future connections. I've kept in touch with those attorneys, and we cross paths from time to time. And so it's, the more people, as you build out your network, as you're coming out of college or law school or even high school, don't burn bridges. Keep in mind, it's a small world out there, and the people you meet may someday be a future boss, maybe a future client, maybe a future reference or referral source. And so it's always good to keep that in mind as you grow your own network.
Oh, Karl, you're just speaking my language right now. I love it so much. And what's funny enough is I actually have a similar experience. Oh, and I'm only 20, which is crazy. But I have a similar experience this past summer. I'd actually worked in my DA's office. So that was very, very valuable. And just like yourself, I was pretty much the jack of all trades. I was doing everything. I was moving all these papers into these different cabinets and going from cabinet to cabinet. And then sometimes they'd be sitting me down and opening this huge book, and they're like, "Okay, this is what I want you to look at. This is what I'm looking for in my brief. Here's a specific rule. Give a little summarization." I'm like, "All right," just kind of throwing myself in the fire. But I think it was really, really useful to give me sort of that visceral feeling of what it would feel like to be in a law office around attorneys and professionals. And it was just a great experience. I love it very much. I got to shout them out every episode. But let's go to the first year of law school at South Texas College of Law, Houston. Some people hate it. Some people love it. Some people say it's one of the best years of my life. How was it for you?
All of those things, probably. I mean, for me, in undergrad at SFA, I was very involved in extracurricular activities. I was Student Foundation Association president. I was student body vice president 2 terms in a row. I was involved in my fraternity. I mean, I was so involved and spent so much time, doing all the activities that come along with those types of organizations, that I didn't really buckle down and focus on my grades. That's not to say that I had bad grades, but I didn't graduate top of my class or anything like that. So when I entered my first year of law school, what some of the attorneys that I had worked with, including Russell Smith and some of the others that I'd met through my dad's network, they emphasized to me that your first year of law school is your most important year of law school, period. Because the grades that you make will set you up for either success or failure in the on-campus recruiting programs that come kind of during that second year. Once you know your class rank, because that's one of the main things that they look at. Obviously, they're looking at other things too, but a lot of these larger firms, if that's what you're interested in doing, which for me at the time, that's what I was interested in. I wanted what appealed to me at that time, and what it looked like was a good paying six-figure job at a big law firm. That was kind of the dream at that phase of my life. And to do that, you really need to do well in law school. So the first year for me was really nose in the book and the computer, right? A little combination of both back then. We did have computers back then, young man. So, it was really just studying like a crazy man. I mean, I'd study every day, after class, before class. It was very laser focused on just making sure that I knocked it out of the park. And so I ended up, either top 2 or 3. I don't remember exactly which position it was. I ended up being one of the top 3, I think, students in the class the first year, which set me on a really good trajectory for job interviews and getting those summer internships that kind of set you on a path for success.
So it absolutely did set you up well. You had 2 summer associate jobs. You were at Williams and Kirker, and then you were at Chamberlain, and this is a really tough one. Herdalica. Did I get that?
Yeah. So actually the Williams Kirker was the summer before. That was an interesting job, actually. That was on the plaintiff side. That was plaintiff personal injury. When I went to law school, I thought I wanted to be a plaintiff's personal injury lawyer. I'm actually on the defense side. So it's kind of funny. It's a little bit ironic that's what inspired me to go to law school. And then somewhere along that journey, I ended up on the opposite side of those cases. But anyway, so I worked at Williams Kirker my first summer. The second summer, which is the one that really matters the most for setting you up for your full-time job, I worked at Winstead PC one half of the summer, and then Chamberlain Herdlicka for the second half of the summer. Both great firms. Enjoyed working with all 3 of those firms, but ultimately found a really good fit with the people at Winstead. I just loved it there, loved the people. The work seemed very interesting. They needed someone who could cover a lot of different bases. So I didn't really want to be plugged into only one partner and one type of work. I wanted more exposure. And the way that they were structured, you really weren't pigeonholed into just one person. You could work with all of the litigation partners that needed help. And so that's what they advertised at the time when I was interviewing, and that ultimately proved to be true. I got to work with attorneys across the entire Houston office, and ultimately even in other offices of that firm. So that was good for me because it just gave me exposure not only to different types of litigation, but it also gave me exposure to different types of partners, like different approaches, different risk philosophies, different preferences, like, hey, here's the best way to argue this, or here's the right way to write this particular brief or this motion. And ultimately, there is no perfect way to do any one thing in litigation, but by getting broader exposure, you can begin to pick and choose what you believe is the best for you and your style, and whether it's writing style or oral advocacy. And you kind of take, the good things from all the different resources, all the different teachers or mentors that you have along the way, and you hopefully, you kind of shape your own style along the way, and hopefully end up, from that collective experience, setting yourself up to be a really strong advocate.
Yeah, I think that's super important what you just said there in terms of finding what is right for you. Something I love to talk about on this podcast with great significance is finding out what you want to do, but especially finding out what you don't want to do. And so how did you sort of figure out for yourself that you wanted to be personal injury going on the defense side as opposed to the plaintiff? And even just generally, how did you figure out personal injury is the right path for me?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'll take them in reverse, actually. So when I first started at Winstead, I was doing everything from finance and banking litigation to appellate work, to real estate litigation, to commercial litigation, right? There's a lot of different types of litigation, but it was perfect because it really gave me exposure to a lot of different, not only a lot of different attorneys, which I already talked about, but a lot of different types of cases. The disputes were very, very different. And I figured out along the way, and kind of as I moved from the Houston office of that firm to the Austin office, which they let me move, which I was very appreciative of, as was my wife, who's from the Austin area. I kind of also transitioned some of the people I was working for. I started working for some people in the Austin office, started doing some construction and real estate litigation, which is also very interesting. But really, when I started doing the personal injury defense work, something resonated more for me with that. A lot of the other types of cases involve more paper pushing, or like, hey, we've got all of these documents. I had a construction case once where I was literally put in a room with bankers' boxes of documents that were just stacked along the wall, 4 or 5 boxes high, all the way around this little room without any windows. And my job was to review all of the documents, looking for certain, needle in the haystack type thing. Obviously, a lot of that's digitized now. Not all of it, but a lot of it is digitized now. But still, for me, that really wasn't where I wanted to take my career. So when I got to do personal injury, by comparison, I started getting to go take depositions, right? So now I'm sitting down with people. I'm getting the facts, not by reviewing 20, 40, 50 bankers boxes. I'm getting the facts by asking questions of a witness or listening to someone else take a deposition if I'm on the other side of the deposition, and going to site inspections to see, where did this accident happen? Let me get eyes on the equipment. Let me go get the instruction and safety manual and the manufacturer's guidelines for this piece of equipment. Let me study this and figure out what happened. How bad was this person injured? Whose fault is it really? And to me, it felt more like what I expected being a lawyer meant or would be like. And maybe that's because my first exposure to law was through my dad, and the expert reports and the depositions that he used to do were personal injury cases. So maybe that just made it a little bit more natural fit for what my expectation was. But once I started doing the personal injury, I realized I genuinely enjoy it. Like I actually like analyzing the cases, figuring out what happened, reporting to my clients their potential exposure, what I recommend is a fair resolution. And so, we just I found the sweet spot, and I realized I want to do more of this. So back in 2007, or not 2007, 2008, sorry, that's when I started. It would 2005, 2006, but 2015. So back in 2014, 2015, I was like, I've got to figure out how to do more personal injury work because I like it. And so I talked to Doyle, and we decided if we were ever going to be able to grow our client base, we needed to hang out our own shingle, so to speak, open our own firm so that we could lower our rates a little bit and attract more personal injury defense clients. And so that's what we did. And it was kind of one of those things, if you build it, will they come? We hoped so. It didn't go exactly as planned when we first started the company, but ultimately it worked, and ultimately they did come. And now we've grown the team to almost, I think, 15 attorneys, 11 paralegals, so a team of 26, and we're hiring right now as well. So it's been rewarding, both from a kind of professional skill set, financially rewarding, emotionally rewarding in many respects as well. I really can say I enjoy what I do for a living, and not everybody can say that. So I'm blessed in that respect.
I mean, first, I just have to say that's my favorite thing to hear every single podcast, is that people enjoy what they're doing. And you clearly are. You're passionate about it. You love it very much. You get fulfillment from it. And that's the goal, really, for anyone out there. And it is the tagline of this podcast. There is no straight path. It's only your own unique journey to that place, that little sweet spot, like you were saying. And let's talk about Doyle and Seelbach. You started in 2015. You said there were some struggles. I want to take a deep dive into that. What were some of the struggles that you went through when starting to open your own firm? I know in previous episodes, I always talk about this with people. There's always trials and tribulations that come with it. What was some of that like, and how'd you get through it?
Yeah, so the path didn't. So you always have a plan on how you want something to go in life, or how you want a particular career change or idea to go. And sometimes things just go off the rails, and you honestly end up learning maybe more from things that go wrong versus everything going right. And so for us, we were leaving a firm, and at the time we wanted to take and hope to take our biggest client with us. And for reasons that I won't get too deep into, the client didn't want to go with us. They wanted to stay with the firm, and that was certainly their decision. And we ended up leaving with what turned out to be one small client at the time, instead of the big client and the small client. So from a financial situation, from kind of a what our trajectory was going to be when we first started, it went from leaving on what we thought would be a high note to, bottom of the barrel, right? We're like, oh my gosh, how are we going to feed our families? How are we going to pay our mortgage? How are we going to make this work? And so it was very stressful. But ultimately we decided, even though that had changed, our vision was still the same. The reasons we were doing it were very pure. They were very, from a business standpoint, very sound business reasons. Like, we knew that the type of work that we wanted to do isn't usually a good fit for really large law firms, because those firms drive really high rates, hourly rates, and personal injury defense work, because it's so high volume, it just doesn't justify that high of a rate. And so we needed to change our rate structure. We wanted that flexibility. And ultimately, it worked. And so we rolled up our sleeves. We didn't technically use a Rolodex, but I used the term loosely. We called everyone we knew. We met with everyone we knew. We went to Dallas. We went to Houston. That was pre-COVID, so Zoom existed but wasn't quite as popular. So a lot of the meetings were in person, and we just, we were hungry, and we weren't afraid to ask. Hey, give me a case. I'd love to show you what we can do. Give me a small one. And once you do that a few times, probably pestering, but politely pestering, you don't want to be a complete nuisance, but it's okay for someone to come off as hungry, right? I want the people that I work with to be hungry and to have, not only some passion, but want to kind of rise to the next level. It's one of the things I look for in associate attorneys. Like, does this person have that drive? Do they have that motivation? Do they want to be a partner someday? Because that tends to be a very good signal of kind of how motivated they're going to be, how much they care about their job and their profession. So anyway, it was a rocky path at first because we lost that big account. But what's interesting about that is, 9 years later, it's kind of come full circle. And so we now, through a new introduction, new relationship, we actually have that client again. So, I always tell people when they ask, I think it happened for a reason. And I ultimately think the reason was, we would have never had the fire in our belly to really swing for the fence and to go really aggressively and try to grow the firm and get clients if that had not happened. Because the prior a client that we had at the time, it was kind of like a warm blanket. Like, okay, this is going to be easy. We're just going to open our own firm. We'll just move all these cases, and everything's going to be great. We're going to make a little more money. The client's going to pay less ultimately, because we're not at a big firm anymore, so you don't have all the equity partner profit stuff that's baked into that model. And we'll be able to get a couple more clients. But instead, we ultimately grew the firm to over 30 institutional clients, and have grown the team significantly. So it's been a fun journey. We're still growing. I want to keep growing. I love it. I think the hard part right now is just, they teach you in law school how to be an attorney. They don't teach you how to be a business owner. And so, you learn a lot. You make a lot of mistakes along the way. But I think that we've gotten the hang of it. And, it's part of what inspired me to start Skribe, which is the legal tech company that I started a couple of years ago with a good friend of mine, Tom Irby. And, we've also had success with that. And so it's been a fun journey.
Yeah, I mean, it's a fantastic story. There's so many great lessons within it. Just having that fire, having that drive, being hungry, pestering, well, not in a bad way, but just pestering people, trying to get those clients there. I love to hear all that stuff. It's an amazing story. But we talk about the Rolodex, and now we sort of look at it as networking. So can you talk about how important networking has been for your career, and what advice would you have for people in order to sort of tap into that networking bubble that you need to build?
Well, I think network. So what's the best way to start with this topic? They also don't teach you at law school how to make it rain, right? They do not teach you how to go get clients. And they also, a lot of law firms, and I'm not going to pick on the one I worked at. I actually loved that firm and respect the heck out of it. But it is not uncommon for attorneys to work at law firms and get very busy with their head down, working on their tasks for the partners that they report to, for the clients that they, are working on. And they don't take, they're working for the business, but they're not working on their business, right? And so, the way I think about it is, if I'm an associate at a big firm, my nameplate on the door, in the old days, I guess I can say that now. I really don't feel that old, but maybe I'm getting older. In the older days, when I first started, you would actually get a nameplate on your door at the law firm. And I was told when I first started, think of that as your shingle. Like, that is your first shingle. It is your name on that door. Now, you may be a part of a larger company, but it is time for you to build your brand, your reputation, and your client base. And think of it as though the first round of clients you have are the people you report to, the partners. So you should treat them the way you would treat an outside client. And if you think about it through that lens and you treat them that way and you do a really good job, eventually they will get comfortable and say, okay, well, I know this person's going to do a good job. I'm going to put them in front of this client, or I'm going to put them in front of this prospect. Now, it's not just that alone. I mean, there's other pieces to this, right? And they don't really spend a ton of time teaching you at law firms in general. A lot of times it's a little bit of lip service on, oh, you need to be developing business. And if you want to make partners someday, you need to go develop business. And here, we're going to send you to, a lunch and learn where we're going to have someone come in and talk to you about how to develop business. Those are good. There is value in those types of sessions, but you really have to put something in motion. It's not just going to magically happen from going to some lunch and learns or webinars or CLEs. You have to kind of build a plan, and you have to start, eating the elephant one small bite at a time. And there's several ways to do that. One is start joining organizations, not like 5 or 10 or 15, a couple, 2 or 3 that are strategic organizations that are relevant to what you want to do. And, you're not going to be president of the organization in the first year, but you can be a member and you can volunteer and you can start to meet people that are in the industry that you're interested in. And, getting meaningfully involved in organizations is a great way to get your name out there. Another way to get your name out there is speaking. So some of the clients that we've gotten over the years have been through speaking engagements, presenting on a topic that's relevant to the type of client that you want to get. For us, we do personal injury defense. So we have presented on relevant topics related to defending companies in personal injury cases, to, all sorts of different prospective clients, either at their office, say, hey, we have this accredited course that your team of adjusters or your team of attorneys can get credit for, and we'll come in and we'll bring you lunch and we'll talk to you. And, ultimately, they want to know that the person they're hiring is credible, knows what they're talking about, and maybe a little bit likable. Like, you want to pass what I have a beer with this person, or what I want to have a cup of coffee with this person. And that becomes much easier to do if they've actually seen you and heard you, and you're not just a name in an email. I would say in person is best at some point, although we have gotten a lot of clients just over Zoom meetings. But it is nice at some point to be able to break bread with the people and actually meet them and talk to them outside of a computer. But yeah, those are some of the things that we've done. Speaking engagements are important. Writing articles can help. Getting involved in organizations can help. One other thing that I used to do that I would encourage attorneys to do in particular, almost anytime I go out of town for a deposition or a mediation or a site inspection, and more of those things happen online now, but there still are some that are in person. When I was a senior associate, I would go out of my way to find out what client or prospective client lives or works anywhere near where I am going to be. Let me make this trip that was originally go perform task A on a case into, I'm going to go do that, but I'm also going to do a little bit of business development while I go do that. And so it was kind of a kill 2 birds with 1 stone approach. And you have to keep track of it too. Like, you have to document it. At the firm I was at before, you did a self-evaluation at the end of every year, and everybody kind of, oh, I got to draft a self-evaluation. What a pain. But actually, I kind of looked at it as an opportunity to finish documenting and polish what I had accomplished over the prior 12 months and help hold myself accountable. And, am I doing the things that I know I need to be doing to further my career? And, if you put in the work, if you plant the seeds, ultimately it will grow. But for most of us, it tends to not be, handed to you. It tends to not be all luck. There is probably a little bit of luck along the way. But, it does take hard work, and you got to put in the time. You got to put in kind of the blood, sweat, and tears, as they say. But usually if you're doing it for the right reasons, it'll pay off. It'll happen.
I couldn't agree more with that. In terms of luck, a lot of it is just luck, but you can always be expanding that surface of luck, making sure you're raising your chances that you will strike that luck. I love what you talk about with likability. Would I take him out for a beer or not? It also goes towards that authenticity, being authentic, being able to hone relationships with those people that can last forever, bring you business, whatever it may be. But I'd like to switch gears because you yourself have quite the entrepreneurial spirit. So do I think at least. I'm aspiring of one. But you were founder at edepot.com, and then in 2022 you had founded Skribe. So what is Skribe? Can you tell the audience a little bit about it? I'm very interested about it too. And what does the future look like for Skribe?
Yeah. So, for me, one of the things that is core to both of my businesses, the law firm and Scribe, is finding out the truth of what happened in a case. And in my opinion and in my experience, one of the best ways to do that is through taking depositions. And I want to take depositions quickly in a case. I want to get a person, on video, being recorded, and find out what do they know about how this happened, or how bad this person was injured, or whether they have pre-existing degenerative conditions in their spine or not. And so I think the quickest way from A to B on a case, and what will actually help attorneys accelerate the resolution of a case, is go take the depositions. Don't wait. It seems like attorneys wait too long to take depositions in your average personal injury case, and frankly, in a lot of other cases too. And so for me, video depositions in particular have always been the most powerful form of evidence, because unlike just a stale transcript on a sheet of paper, when you're doing video, just like we're doing now, you get the tone, you get the inflection, you can really start to read the credibility and kind of the character of the person that you're talking to in a way that words on a page just do not convey. And so finding the truth is critically important. And video, I think, is the best form of evidence you can have in a case. So Scribe is designed to make it much, much easier for attorneys and legal professionals to capture and analyze and share legal testimony like depositions. And so Scribe is ultimately we actually are an official partner with Zoom. We're Zoom ISV partner, and we drastically reduce the cost and increase the speed of taking legal testimony. So instead of working with an old-fashioned court reporting agency where, you call the middleman, the court reporting agency, they then call a stenographer and a videographer, and they have to coordinate all of it. And, their price sheet is 2 pages long, and there's a lot of fluff baked into the invoices. And, it's a very slow, outdated process of scheduling the event, of capturing the testimony, of getting it back. So like if this was a deposition with an old-fashioned court reporting company, I typically wouldn't get a transcript of this or the video for weeks, several weeks, unless I pay double or triple. They have what they call rush fees, which is always infuriating. So what we wanted to build with Scribe we wanted to take the legal industry to the modern era. And we wanted to take the power of Zoom, the power of remote video, plus the power of AI transcription, and apply that to the legal industry so that attorneys can take a deposition at 11 a.m., finish it at 1, and go get a cup of coffee, and by 2 o'clock they are reviewing a video sync transcript of their deposition. And within just a few days, we deliver a professionally proofread, legally formatted transcript of the deposition, no rush fee, just by default. And so that was really what we set out to do, was to modernize that process and bring down the cost of that.
Law students, are you feeling overwhelmed, stressed, or short on time in law school? Maybe you just want someone to show you a step-by-step framework to master the topics you're learning in your classes. I know the pressure you're under, and I've got the perfect solution for you. My course, The Law School Operating System, is proven to help you conquer law school with confidence and ease.
Created by Lisa Blasser, a former guest on the podcast and founder of the Law School Success Institute, this course breaks down every subject into manageable main topics that you run through a comprehensive study system to thoroughly prepare you for class and final exams. No more feeling like you need to know everything all at once in the beginning.
But that's not all, Nate. The Law School Operating System also teaches you how to schedule your studying and time effectively. For every topic, you'll know which study step you're on and when you'll complete it every week of your semester. No more mad dash cram sessions, more time with your loved ones. And with my system, you'll walk into your exams knowing you've given 100% of yourself, that there's nothing more you could have done to succeed, and there's no better confidence than that.
Lisa breaks it down like this: one class, one list of main topics, and one system to master each topic. With recorded and live sessions for students available on her website and partnerships with law schools nationwide, the Law School Operating System is here to help you thrive from day one to the final exam. Ready to take control of your law school journey and operate at your full potential in law school? Visit www.lisablasser.com today and enroll in the Law School Operating System. Be sure to use code LSOSNATE10 at checkout for 10% off the recorded course. That is code LSOSNATE10 at checkout. Now, back to the show. I mean, it's a fantastic idea. It's a fantastic technology. I love to hear that so much. It is very, very interesting. And cutting over that overhead, being more efficient, being more effective, is a great segue into our last 5 questions here, because that's exactly the question. It is sort of the tech stack question per se, is that throughout my journey, throughout this entire podcast, the law as an industry is moving in a certain direction. Just like you said, it is modernizing. People are using software technology, AI technologies, just like Scribe, moving in sort of that direction, being more efficient, cutting that overhead, cutting down the cost, and not letting the cost come back to the clients themselves, being able to have them get more bang for their buck and not have to pay so much money for all the court reporting and all that stuff in your case. But what does your tech stack look like? What sort of recommendations for products, AI or software, any sort of that would you have for attorneys out there? You could throw in Scribe as well.
Yeah, of course. No, that's great. That's a great question. So one of the things that I use and I'm looking at actually deploying at my firm is Case Text. So Case Text is now acquired by Thomson Reuters. Hopefully they don't ruin it. But it's a great legal research tool. They have some AI capabilities built into their product. I think they call it Code Counsel, if I'm remembering the naming convention. Used to be called Kara. Maybe those are technically separate features, but Case Text is the name of the legal research platform. I really like them. They're priced pretty fairly. Very modern interface, very easy to use. And their AI feature that they've come out with, I've been pretty impressed with in my process of kind of demoing it and testing it. I haven't officially rolled it out to my firm yet. I'm vetting some others. I've looked at Lexis AI. I've looked at Westlaw Precision Plus, or some of these names, I kind of forget exactly what the names are. But Westlaw has an AI-powered tool. Lexis has Lexis AI. I like Case Text the best so far, based on what I'm seeing. Those are very, very helpful. I think that if it's deployed in a responsible way with training, you probably could do an enterprise license for ChatGPT. I just would recommend that if you're going to do that as an attorney, you have a big disclaimer that do not use it for legal research, do not use it for case law. I think you can use it for other things, for summarizing a document, for maybe taking some notes that you took and making it into a more coherent email, maybe even drafting sample objections in response to discovery, copy in the question and say, hey, I think I should object because blah, 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 whatever it is, whatever your objection is. This seems vague and ambiguous, and what they really should be, asking is X, and ask it to generate a first draft. It's a good first draft tool, but you should never rely on it for a final draft. And you should always be familiar enough with the case that you know if the fact is true or not, because it can hallucinate. On the Scribe side of things, Scribe has 2 components to it. So one is modernizing how you take remote depositions. The other that we haven't really talked about yet is helping you manage all of your audio and video files. So if you have audio and video files in a case, whether it's a deposition, a 911 call, a body cam recording, whatever it is, any type of audio and video file, you can upload it into Scribe. You get a near instant transcription, and it is synced to the audio and video so that you can actually go in and create clips of the key testimony or the key evidence. And then you can insert the clips through a URL, through a clip. You can put that in your brief or into your report or into your demand letter, which is really, really cool. And I'm testing, and I'm not sure when you're going to release this episode. I am testing right now a new feature, an AI feature that we will be releasing probably later this summer. That's going to be, it's kind of a knock your socks off feature. I mean, I'll just say that. Keep an eye on Scribe, keep an eye on the feature that we're releasing later this summer. It really is cool. I was just testing it this morning on some depositions that took place yesterday. And, it helped save me so much time. Something that would have taken hours, I was able to do in about 15 minutes. So, we're on the cusp of a big change in the way that attorneys practice law. People have said that for a little bit, but I think we're starting to see it materialize, and clients are going to demand it, is what's ultimately going to happen. Even if the attorneys don't necessarily want to embrace it with open arms, there are going to be clients who start cutting bills, refusing to pay for things that can be sped up or automated using software.
So that's just an example of everyone out there. Don't fall behind, because it is certainly changing rapidly every single day. These new AI technologies specifically. I mean, I always come on here, I always talk about my love for ChatGPT, but every single day it seems like there's something new going on. They're doing something new. They're moving in a certain direction. And even just in the whole legal landscape, I love Scribe, by the way. I love the managing the audio files. When you said you were going to insert the links, it was like my brain made the connection. I thought of it. I was like, oh, that'd be cool. And I was like, oh, you're actually doing it. So I love that very much. But fourth to last question here, live on the Lawyers in the Making podcast. Karl, what are your book recommendations for people? Doesn't have to be about the law, just some of your favorite books, something you give a gift to someone.
Yeah, okay, good question. So I have a few that I've read or listened to. I kind of do a combination of both. Sometimes I read them on a Kindle. Sometimes I listen to them when I'm driving to work. One that is actually sitting on my desk because I like it so much is Unreasonable Hospitality by Will Guidara. And it's actually a restaurant hospitality book about 11 Madison Park in New York and the story how it went from a brasserie to the #1 restaurant in the world. So it's a great book. It talks about the importance of kind of going the extra mile and doing things for customers and clients that maybe they don't expect in a way that doesn't necessarily cost a lot, but it can leave a very big impact in what their experience felt like. And I think it's important it's very important in restaurants, but it's also important in any type of service company, any type of company, period. But professional services is a great fit for that. And so we kind of go out of our way at our firm to make sure that we're providing quote unquote unreasonable hospitality in everything that we do. I also recently read, and I'm looking to the right because I was pulling up Audible. I want to make sure I don't remember the author's name off the top of my head, so I was going to check. Founder Brand by Dave Gerhardt is probably a great book for someone who is starting a business. It really does inspire you to, kind of build in public, like talk about what you're doing on your social media, do podcasts like this, because ultimately, you can be building the best thing in the world or, a really great company where your people are awesome. But if no one hears about it, and if no one has an opportunity to read about it, how are they ever going to find you? And so I think Founder Brand is really, really good. There's, and then the other one is, Traction, which is an older business book by Gino Wickman. It's really more process oriented about how to establish a vision, a accountability chart for your company where everyone kind of knows, like, here's why this company exists. Here's the why behind it. And then here's the how we're going to do it and make it happen and try to get A and B players on the team who, not everybody's going to be A player, right? You're going to have B players, but your goal is to have a good combination of A players and B players and hopefully no C players so that you can trust each other. You can kind of rowing in the same direction. You know what you're going to work for. You know what the company's mission is, and here's how you fit into the bigger picture. I think that's very important when you're running a business as well.
Yeah, just yesterday on a podcast with Ron Latz, he had brought up unreasonable hospitality as well. I think that might have been like the 20th time that anyone has ever talked about this book on this podcast. Now I have to buy it. I will be buying it today because everyone's talking about it. Now I have to get it. But there's a great book recommendation. So I always love asking that question because I get a variety of different books, a very diverse collection. So I'm building up a nice list here of all the recommendations I've ever received on this podcast. But third to last question here. What are the
Yeah.
sorts of things you consume, not food, consume on a daily basis, through social media? So X,
Oh,
Instagram.
I thought you meant food at first when you
No,
said
no, we could do that question too. LinkedIn, Substack, YouTube, Reddit, any podcasts you listen to that you enjoy, any recommendations of people on Substack or LinkedIn that you really enjoy reading. What is crossing the transom of Karl's mind on a daily basis?
That's a good question. I typically will have an audiobook that I'm listening to when I'm driving to and from work. Right now, I'm actually listening to The Mom Test by Rob Fitzpatrick, and Atomic Habits by James Clear. I typically will have more than one book going at a time, just because sometimes I'll get a little bored with a book. Not always, but sometimes I'll just kind of need a different flavor or a different person speaking in my ear on the Audible track. So I do that a fair amount. As far as reading, I mean, I am on X or Twitter, and so I do have some, various people that I follow and kind of legal tech stuff usually, but also mainstream stuff from Elon Musk and others. I read so much at work that I find that by the time I get home, I often just want to relax with my family and hang out with my kids and maybe watch TV, with my wife, or watch a movie with the family. So I don't really have a bunch of like magazines or newspapers that I read all the time. I typically keep up on current events through either Apple News, or sometimes just by watching the evening news. But I guess LinkedIn, I actually get a fair amount of news from LinkedIn. I spend a fair amount of time on LinkedIn because it tends to be a good way to be in the conversation with regard to the latest technology tools that attorneys are using. I think a lot of conversation takes place there, a lot of healthy conversation and debate and discussion. Those tend to be the main places for me.
Well, speaking of hanging out with your family, it's a great segue into our second to last question, which, Karl, what is an ideal Friday night and Sunday morning look for Karl?
Well, it varies a lot. It depends on, do we have a volleyball tournament out of town this weekend? Do we have a basketball tournament out of town? Do we have some family event that we need to go attend? So, at this phase in my life with the kids, ages 8 and 12 and involved in sports and extracurriculars, it really does vary. I mean, in April, we had 7 weekends in a row where we were out of town, and it was volleyball, it was a wedding, it was a friend's 40th birthday party. It was another volleyball tournament. It was sadly a funeral, but like life happens, right? And so I would say it's really my favorite one actually is just winding down on a Friday with either takeout dinner, or we go out to eat somewhere, we come home, we all cuddle up on the couch and we put on a family friendly movie, because it's kind of a way to unwind and just kind of relax a little bit. If the weather's good, maybe take a swim at the pool at my house. And then Sundays, it just varies. Sometimes we go to church on Sundays. Sometimes we're out and about and traveling. I mean, it's kind of all over the place. It's this phase of life is not as predictable as it was when I was in my 20s or early 30s. When I was in my 20s, you kind of have your weekend to do whatever you want every weekend. And once you have kids, your kids kind of as they should be. Your kids are the focus. And if they're involved in sports, and particularly club sports, that begins to consume a lot of your time.
Oh, I know the volleyball can get very crazy. I never played volleyball myself, but one of my good friends does, and he used to be traveling all over the country. I played basketball when I was younger, so we were always traveling for that. My brother, so my dad would be taking my brother to Pennsylvania. I'd be going upstate New York. Everyone's just all over the place, even lacrosse. We're all over the place. So I understand that. It's great stuff though. the sports are amazing. Just makes everyone happy. You get that championship, you win that tournament, you feel great about yourself. But we're down to our last question here, Karl. I do this at the end of every single episode, but what are your words of wisdom for the aspiring law students, the current law students, and the legal professionals out there in the world?
Parting words of wisdom. So for law students and aspiring lawyers of the world, make sure it's what you really want to do. Right? You only get so many resets. That's not to say you have to stick with something you don't like doing. You shouldn't. But I think to your point, like you mentioned, you did an internship. I think that is extremely important to get some exposure, because it's not exactly what it looks like on Suits or some other TV show or movie. So you want to make sure you know what you're getting into before you decide to commit either 3 years of law school or many years of your life to a law firm. So you got to go get the exposure. Of course, it's going to be a little different once you're actually licensed and you're in the trenches and you're the one doing the work. But just being at a law office, getting that exposure, sitting in on a deposition, or if you want to be a litigator, or sitting in a transactional attorney's office and having them tell you about the deal that they're working on and the type of work that they need to get it across the finish line. You should get that exposure in the area that you think you may have interest in before you go spend a bunch of time, money, and effort, becoming licensed as an attorney, because you may find something you don't want to do. Now, I will also say that just because you go to law school doesn't mean you have to go into private practice, right? Law school can be a very good foundation to do a lot of other things. Maybe you also want to go get an MBA, or maybe your law degree, helps you get in to a legal department of some company where you have a different role. You're not practicing law, per se, but the legal experience, the legal expertise helps broaden your view, your worldview, your, education, and what it takes to be a successful addition to the company. But, I think of it as a marathon, not a sprint, is probably the best advice I could give. Like, you need to be really focused on the longer term kind of goals that you should set for yourselves. It's like, look, like a diet. Okay, I want to lose 30 pounds. Well, you shouldn't just do a fad diet and try to lose 30 pounds in 2 months, right? It's not going to last. It may work, but it's not going to last. That is not a healthy way to lose weight. What you need to think about are, what are the lifestyle changes that I can make? What are the changes I can make to my diet, the changes I can make to my exercise? Can I find an activity that I enjoy doing that gets me physically active to where I don't even think of it as a workout? I think of it as fun. Same thing can be applied to career, right? Like, what are things that I can start putting into practice now that will have a benefit for me later? And it could be little things like, I'm really interested in real estate. Okay, let me see if I could see, maybe the local president of the Real Estate Council of Austin would be up for letting me take them to coffee once a month. Just once a month, I go take them to coffee. I pick their brain a little bit. I get to know them. Little things like that can begin to have really big impacts later in your life, later in your career.
I couldn't agree more. It's beautifully said, Karl. Consistency is key, and you just keep compounding that interest over time, and you're going to hit that hockey stick eventually. But Karl, that's the episode. That's the podcast. So thank you so much for coming on here, spreading your wisdom, spreading your experiences. And for everyone out there listening, thank you for tuning in. Be sure, check us out, lawyersinthemaking.substack.com, lawyersinthemaking, one word, substack.com. And I will see you all in the next one.